Coming up in episode 20 of Netball Unlocked, we're joined by another very special guest. George Inger is along to review round 10 and look ahead to round 11. We'll get the lowdown on George's return to the UK, her injury and what she's up to now. Plus, we'll reflect on our Claire Nelson exclusive from last week. Hello, and welcome to episode 20, a landmark episode. So we've gone global for a landmark episode. We've got Chloe live from Greece at the moment, but we don't know if this is going to stay the case. So before I introduce George, Chloe, let's at least get a hello from over there. Are you okay?
I am here. I did try. There was an attempt. Even if I don't survive the whole thing, I was here.
Yeah, let it not be said you've not put the effort in. I was going to introduce you in a bit of a Eurovision style, I thought, and here with the votes from the Greek jury is Chloe Merrill. But also, as you can see, we've got George Inger along for this week. George, delighted to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on.
We've got plenty to ask you, but first of all, as we kind of ask all of our guests, because most people now are first timers for us, what are your first impressions of Super League? Because you've been a bit here, there, and everywhere, but a little bit of Next Gen, a little bit of commentary, and now you're with us. So, what are your overall impressions?
No, it's definitely an interesting season personally for me, but I'm loving it. Like, turns out I am one of the biggest netball nerds ever, and I absolutely love watching it and kind of like pulling games apart and looking at players and stuff like that. So I've been really, really enjoying it. I've actually loved the introduction of the soft and gentle super shot, which at first I was like, oh, I don't know if we need it, but I absolutely love it. I think it means that every single team going into a game doesn't know whether they're going to win or lose, which I love. I love the sort of intensity and the sort of heart in your throat moment. So I've been really, really loving watching the girls and kind of seeing some of the younger players come through. Obviously, I spent the last 4 seasons in New Zealand, kind of definitely in that A and Z bubble. And then coming back, it's actually awesome to see some of the kids that were sort of on the cusp absolutely smashing it, or people that, you know, was probably too young at the time I was around, just coming through and doing amazing. And actually being in the Next Gen and part of that whole environment, seeing some of them progress is crazy. I was on call with Neve and Timmy the other day, and I was like, oh my goodness, I am 10 years older than you. And I was like, this is wild. Do not swear in front of the children. So no, it's really good.
I should caveat this very quickly by saying, George, you are still only 26, so you're not that old. You don't have to worry about it just yet.
Well, they say you're only as old as you feel, and I feel about 70, so I don't know.
George, I guess, yeah, you've been through a lot, I suppose, on this journey, which brought you back to the UK. I remember seeing the tweet, which kind of captured your first sort of Next Gen minutes. Tell us a little bit about that, how it feels to be back on a court in the UK. You know, catch us up a little bit with everything.
No, it's been a lot. It's been a big couple of years. No, so originally I obviously was in Super League from when I was like 16 to when I was 21, 22. And then I went over to New Zealand for 4 years. And halfway through that, I did a good old ACL, PCL, all the good old ruptures and fractures and stuff like that. So did a pretty decent job of it. And we kind of did a year of rehab. Needed some more surgery, needed some more work. Just wasn't kind of having it. And just before my wedding, I had a huge flare up. So like really puffy knee, really infected. We were like, oh my goodness, like, am I going to be able to walk down the aisle kind of conversations? Had to go back to my surgeon, and he kind of was like, look, you need to prepare yourself to never play again. Like, it's not looking great. So I was like, oh, put that to the back of my mind. Let's just get married. Which was incredible, like absolutely, obviously I'm biased, it was my wedding, but it was fantastic, so much fun. And then I got back to the UK, and you kind of get like sort of when you're injured or you come back, you have like a seeing out period of sort of support. So I still have my seeing out period with England Netball, and I was working really closely with Roz over at Bisham and my other physio Charlotte, and we kind of all of us got this like plan together, and and we was like, right, let's just throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. I've been told I may never play, but we're going to go for it. And we kind of did do that, and got a really good rehab program in place. Got lots and lots of tests done, and things taken from the knee to see what was going on in there. And yeah, we kind of got it all figured out, realized what was going wrong, what was going right, tried some different medications, found one that really worked and that keeps my knee down. And yeah, I managed to get back on court for the London Mavericks. Oh, I was literally, I've never really been nervous, but when I tell you I was shooting and my hands were like shaking, I was thinking, do I know how to play? Am I going to know what to do? And the first thing I did when I got on court was just like aimlessly run around because I didn't know what I was doing anymore. But it was the best feeling ever. And to kind of be able to come back to Mavericks and sort of get back on court from them, it's a big club for me. Like, it's got so much love from me in regards to, like, that's where I started my career. That's where I always come back to Mavericks, and to kind of continue my journey with them and be supported by them, taking that massive risk and being like, come back to the next gen, give it a go. And then it kind of working. Yeah. Big things, huge. I felt amazing, even though I was really nervous. So yeah, it was good.
I mean, it's quite a journey. We'll get into it in a little bit more detail. But as well as that, George, I've seen you on a training court in the last few weeks when you were sort of taking my daughter's team before they were headed off to nationals. What else are you up to? Because you're busy out and about, aren't you?
No, definitely. So a lot of coaching, which is something I never really saw myself get into, but yeah, just doing loads and loads of coaching at the moment. So I've got like my own academy at Gosfield School, which is awesome, and an opportunity that kind of just like jumped up, that kind of sprung up on me, but has been absolutely incredible. So I get to go in and I get to work with the girls, all the girls in the school from like year 4 all the way up to sixth form, and we do like loads of different netball training and skills and drills and stuff like that. And then kind of started there and then pushed it on to working at Nottingham as well, and like I drop into Bancroft also, so I get to work with girls sort of based all around this end of the country, this half of the country, which is awesome. And going into schools is something that I guess I'd never really done before, so doing a lot of that, as you said, dropping into netball club sessions. So always back at Terrentford. I'm such a Terrentford girl through and through. I've never played for like any other sort of club team. So yeah, going back is awesome, and working with Sarah G and like working with the girls. So they've been doing some work before their nationals, and then also they helped me get my level 2. So thank you very much to the girls. But yeah, just loads of coaching. My partner and I have like set up our own coaching business. So I kind of do all like the netball coaching and do netball camps, and he does like basketball camps. So we're kind of just starting off and then seeing where that will take us. So yeah, it's really cool.
And obviously a little bit of commentary, a little bit of podcasting, and so just general married life. You've crammed a lot in, George.
I have crammed a lot in. I've dragged him along with me every step of the way. He came to England. It was literally like a storm, and I was like, we're doing this, and this weekend. And literally this weekend, the game was up in Sheffield, and I went to commentate. And I was like, do you just fancy coming with me? And it was like a 6-hour round trip. And he loved it. And he was like, I couldn't hear you. And I was like, you're not meant to. But no, he's a good egg.
So funny. Kind of reminds me of me and my husband as well, where I'll take him to like the season opener, and he's found a way to like engage his mates, and they just sit and watch like 8 hours of netball with some beers, and I'm like, you enjoy having fun? They're like, yeah, we love it. But it's like, yeah,
they think they don't love it, and they do. Braden bought his like one of his best mates the other day, and they were just sat there watching the Mavericks pulse game, having the time of their lives. They were really having a great time.
Because netball is for the boys as well. Needs to be remembered.
It is for the boys.
Yeah. Aside from sort of other bits and pieces, Chloe, I think it's worth reflecting on a bit of a drop, I believe the kids call it, at the end of last week, where we spoke to Claire Nelson. It's the first time I think any of us have really heard from the Super League managing director this year. Lots for us to take from it. Had a chance to reflect on it. What were your main takeaways?
I think the first thing you've just said there, Paul, is a big one. Is since the league launch, we really haven't had Claire out in public speaking. So it felt like you and I had to kind of almost go back to some key points from before the season started. So, getting in on the on the super shot and how that kind of came quite late into the game, and doing that sort of questioning, as well as kind of looking at where we are now, because we wanted to catch her midway through the season, but for various reasons we didn't, and then it ended up sort of being round 9 that we got her. So we're then in that sort of position where half's done and a bit to go, and trying to also look ahead to next season. So we were a bit all over the place, and there was a lot of ground to cover in the time that we had. And Claire is above all a busy person, so we were pleased that she gave us that time. But there was a lot to get through. Claire loves to talk, and and that's a good thing that she wants to come out and do that. But it's sort of unpicking what she's saying as you're going along, I suppose, is the challenge for you and I, also when we know there are lots of things that we want to ask as well. But look, it was a good conversation. I'm pleased we got it up there. And I think one of the key things for me as well was hearing her say to us, I want to do this more often. Let's keep in contact. Let's do this little and often, because context is really important. So I think we want to know more about that context. People listening want to know more about that context. So if she's up for it, we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As any good journalist does, I was taking notes all the way through it. And I think some of the main takeaways, I think sort of thinking about what's going to be next, and I'd like your take on this, George, because I think everyone we've spoken to so far has always been kind of, okay, let's get up and running. Let's throw everything at it. Let's see where we go. Let's see where we are at the end of this year. And I think sort of people like Sam Bird, Karen Gregg, Vic Burgess have all said at different times, like, actually, maybe the next off season might be just as important, where we learn from this season and put it into practice next year. And sort of Claire said that herself. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the league kind of responds to various things that have happened this year. What's kind of your verdict on that?
No, definitely. I think that when you start something new, it kind of needs to be unpacked and has to be quite different. Almost when you start something brand new, obviously there's no history of it, so it's kind of trial and error and what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. And I think although the girls, it would have been a slightly different pre-season this year for them, I don't actually think, you're quite right, that we'll unpack that until the next pre-season. I think certain teams are still playing for the 1 point game. Is that really the way to win games anymore? But shown that it's probably not. You need to be getting your shooters up to these 2 point games, which does make it a very shooter dominant game. Obviously, I think that netball is like the ultimate team sport. You have a great goalkeeper, but if your shooter can't shoot, it doesn't matter. Same if you've got a centre that can't get you the ball. So, ultimate team sport, but it's definitely made a little bit more pressure on the shooters. And it's kind of changed it from maybe players that are super, super skilled, but maybe don't have that long range shot in them, aren't actually seeing as much court time as you would traditionally see. And other people are getting way more opportunities just because they have the ability to sort of deal with that pressure and put the long range shot up. So it's definitely changed how you look at the talent pool and what you're bringing into teams and how you're bringing in players into teams. I also think that the umpiring and the rule changes have changed the game massively as well. So much change in such a short period of time. I actually think good. I think that the Super League needed to change. I think having the amount of teams that we used to have diluted that talent pool. And now you're seeing teams go out and put in strong performances. Bottom of the league can beat one of the top players, top teams in the league, and stuff like that. So, I do definitely think that it was something that was needed, and actually has completely changed the game for the better. And I'm excited to see what the preseason brings for the girls, because it is so different. You've now got all video of the girls that are playing. How are you going to shut that down? Who's signed next season? Who's playing where? It's good. You want to keep it fresh and exciting.
I think also, sorry, yeah, off the back of what George is saying, because very netball answer, which I think is really important, because we do need to look at the game from that sports side, which is kind of one of the things I was trying to put on Claire a bit, which is sort of like, let's keep coming back to the integrity of the sport, as well as all the shiny new stuff that we're doing, which is important to sell the league. And Claire sort of spoke about finding being on a journey of finding the right sponsor and putting all these things together. And it's not all perfect as it comes together, but we're trying to do it to attract investors. So, you know, that it's great to get George's perspective on that. I think for me, one of the things that will be really interesting, and Claire alluded to it, is this summer is so big for women's sport, but netball will not be anywhere near that, because it will be women's football with the Euros, and the Women's Rugby World Cup is going to be at home. So two massive national sports where with some big personalities, like Alona Maher's going to be back in England, back on the world stage again. You've got the Euros. I mean, the proof is the fact that we had Mary Earps at the netball. So, you know, we want to find, netball needs to find its space in that. So it's kind of like, cool, we have this big season, and there's still you know, the pointy end is coming, and it's coming really fast, and it looks like it's going to be really exciting. But it's like, how does all of this stuff that we're going through, and there's been some teething problems, but there've been some good bits that are coming out of it. How do we maintain that momentum? So that will also be a big test, I think, of the sport, of the league, and of Claire as well, as we go forwards.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because for me, it's almost like, and the super shot situation between Mavericks and Panthers and Rhinos a couple of weeks ago, kind of was the whole thing encapsulated in a nutshell, right? It was like, this is a sporting moment that really kind of shouldn't have been overseen. We kind of had it a bit this weekend with the confusion around the league table as well, which I will tell you, could have told you this at the start of the season, that there will be a league table problem coming at some point. But that end of that game was so important, because a bonus point for Pulse kept them top of the table, which in the grand scheme of things might be really important. So like when we think about all of these things, and we talk about stuff, to bring it back to what's going to be like the next phase of this, whether that's player contracts, whether that's a vastly superior statistical offering, so that journalists and podcasters and players can do their research, can talk about the sport in a much more sport-friendly way. Because at the minute it feels like, and I think I said this to Claire, it feels like we're maybe hedging our bets on what this might be, to go and take it to someone at the end of the season, when there might be some pretty fierce competition, right? And we're seeing domestic football and domestic cricket, certainly from a girls' perspective, really kind of rocket up as well. So when you throw in a couple of national tournaments as well, it does feel like it's going to be big. But we'll check in with Claire again, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in the next few weeks. One other thing I was going to mention, I think you're better on dates than me, Chloe, and I was going to ask you about this as well, George. We're not too far away from maybe England squad announcements. George, can you give us a bit of a player's insight? How does that whole process tend to play out? Not that I'm saying you're in England contention or any other such controversies that you've dealt with in the past.
No, definitely. Obviously, I'm not really, I'm getting back to playing, but obviously was part of the program for years. So I can only speak on the experiences that I had when I was obviously in that program. So traditionally, what normally happens is you'll get all the players will get an email, and you have to express an interest to say, I want to be part of the England program and the England future. So you're expressing your interest to say, yep, this is what I want to do. There'll be like various different selection processes, and then like selectors will come together, coaches will come together. And obviously throughout the season, obviously all of these selectors and coaches, and like the Roses, sort of the whole setup of the Roses, will be looking at players, and they drop into Super Leagues and have a lot of contact with the players. And that's not just sort of coaches, but also physio, strength and conditioning, nutrition, just everything that comes with being an athlete. So that's all checked in on. And then it gets kind of crunch time, and you've expressed your interest, and then the girls will get an email with whether basically you made it or not. So you've been successful and you've made this, or you've made this or that. So yeah, you'll get an email that basically just says what you've gotten into. If you kind of haven't gotten into it, it'd be like, oh, unfortunately, not this time, sort of thing. But that's how it has traditionally worked. Obviously, when I've been in and around it, I remember when we were kids, we used to just get a letter, and you'd do a trial, and you'd pick up the letter off the floor, and it was basically like, you're in or you're out. And that was like a good over 10 years ago. That would have been about 13 years ago, which was tough for me because I couldn't barely read. I'm severe dyslexic, so I'd pick it up. And then I remember I said to Emily Drakford once, I was like, can you just tell me if I've made it? that was fun. But that's kind of obviously how it's developed and evolved now. So you'd have some, you then go to your teammate, oh, did you make it? And you'd be stood next to them and they're like, no. And then they're like, did you? And you would be like, awkward if you had. And then if you hadn't, you'd be like, in it together sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely evolved. But you'll just express to say, I do want it. And then you'll basically find out a couple months later if you've been successful or not.
Yeah, wow. Gosh, that sounds dramatic.
Does dramatic, doesn't it? Yeah.
What a way to find out if you've made it into an England programme. God.
Character building. I look back on it and I'm like, fond times. Like, it was crazy that happened because we just would never do it that way now. But I'm also like, that's what everyone, like, if everyone's memories are sort of that sort of thing from back then, I'm just lucky for the kids, to be fair. Lucky for the new girls, like, kind of coming into the environment, I guess.
Yeah, so a little change. And I think, George, from what you're describing, I think that is roughly what the players are expecting. And I think we are heading towards the end of May, which does feel about around the time players will be finding out. And I think we shall be knowing, but we don't know specifically when that is yet, Paul. But I think we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big sort of 12 months, if we like, because we know we've got a Commonwealth Games around the corner. There's an under-21 World Cup coming up as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how maybe this next cohort takes shape. Before we get on to the weekend, I'm just going to shout out the weekend because I was in Sheffield for what might have been the most stressful weekend of my life as a father. Under 14 nationals. First of all, brilliant weekend. George, I know you've played in these. It's so well run, a brilliant event, like really, really good. Some incredible talent. Loads of people. Got a random message from Lucy Goodman, who was there doing commentary for the stream. So I kind of caught up with her. I think on Sunday, I saw Mickey Austin and Susie Liversidge come over. So I went and had a chat with Mickey, who I know really, really well. Raz and Ellie Ratu came and saw our Turnford girls on Saturday night before they set them off on their game on Sunday. So yeah, look, brilliant weekend. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Didn't quite go as well as we would have liked it to go, but that's due to an incredible standard across the age group. Shout out to Oldham, who did everything really, really well. That's why they were the best team. I saw probably teams play better, maybe more spectacularly, but Oldham just got better and better and better and better from like the first game to the last game. They beat Kingsway Power in the final. So the funny part of that was that in one of the games it was Kingsway Power against Leeds, and on one bench was Lauren Palmer and on the other bench was Maggie Birkinshaw. And like literally 2 hours later, they were supposed to be on the bench together for Rhinos against Mavericks, which I kind of feel like encapsulate the whole netball world in a really short space. But brilliant weekend. George, did you win it? Did you win nationals when you were around? Oh, sorry.
We were runners up to Oldham nonetheless, but we participated in. I think I did 4 in the end because I did the age group. But I have nothing but fond memories of it. Like, so fun, absolutely loved it. When I think back to it, like now, because my final year, Zara Everett actually was our like goal defence, so had some tall girls on that court out there. But yeah, we came runners up to Oldham. You know, I'm a Turnford girl through and through. Like I've said, I can see it. I can see the win. We're gonna keep building. Also, you know, your daughter's only under 14, so it's time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No judgment from me here. No judgment from me here. Brilliant weekend. Like I was really looking forward to it, and it was great. It was really good to be a part of. So yeah, just wanted to shout out basically everyone who put the event on. It was at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield, and honestly, it couldn't have been run better. Could have done with like a proper coffee place close by though. That would be my one criticism. Like, and desperately needed like something very strong at one point.
Netball dad plus caffeine is probably quite a strong combo.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, I think we were all glad as a bunch of parents, we went out for a few glasses of wine and some dinner on Saturday night. That helped.
The stress of it all.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so stressful. I think sometimes it's more stressful for the parents, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. Definitely think so. But look, that meant a week, sort of morning on Monday before I went back to work of catching up on round 10, which obviously has shaped what now looks to be like a really interesting last few weeks in terms of the sort of battle for first, second, and third, which is kind of clearly going to be between Pulse, Lightning, and Thunder. And then that battle between Mavericks and Forest, who of course meet this weekend in what looks like an epic. George, we usually take these like kind of go through them. Is there a game that stands out to you? I think maybe obviously the game that you were at might be a good place to start.
Yeah, no, definitely. The game I was at was stressful. I know that Catherine and I were just sort of talking sort of at one point through, I think Mavericks were 9 goals up, and we were like, I was kind of, you never want to blow out game for a team. You want people to keep competing, and we were kind of talking. It was getting to the point of like that turning, and then I didn't think they were going into extra time or anything like that, and then boom, like they had the most insane, like Rhinos had the most insane third quarter, and for them just like, well, I say something. They made some changes on the court, Rhinos, and then they just came back with the absolute vengeance, and really pushed Mavericks right to the end, sort of to the end of time. I think Rhinos will probably be a bit frustrated there. They had the opportunity to potentially win right near the end and kind of slot in the last goal. And I do think that Mavericks will obviously be really proud of themselves for taking the win in the end, but probably disappointed to let go of a 9-goal lead. That's something that they're not going to want to do. And I think they've kind of been under the pump a little bit in the last couple of games. I think they've had the last 3 games, they've had 2 extra times and then a loss. So, that's potentially not what they want to do going into Forest, obviously having that 4th, 5th sort of rivalry with Forest at the moment. So, no, definitely an interesting game, but it was crazy. It wasn't a huge crowd, but they were going wild in there. It was super electric and super fun to watch. I was loving it. I was trying to commentate, but I was also like going, ooh, like getting used to the whole commentary thing.
Chloe, you messaged me something about a little tactical tweak that you spotted early on.
Yeah, well, I noticed that Eddie Ratu was sort of came off. I think was it in quarter 2, right? And Amy Hepworth-Wayne came on, and we kind of flagged this as an interesting decision by Mavericks sort of before to replace effectively a goal defense goalkeeper with a centre wing defense. But I think in those moments you see why they do that. But then, as George sort of pointed out, the third quarter kind of got away from Mavericks. So I think it shows you that they're still kind of figuring it out, which is quite amazing really, given where we are in the season, and as you said, with such a big game kind of coming up. I think for me, one of the big standouts of that game was Razia Kwashi. I thought on Joyce Mavulu, we know is a tricky customer. Like, I'm a big fan of hers. Like, I think she is a stalwart of the league. But Raz's sort of footwork just it was really kind of critical winning ball for Mavericks in that game. But I think the other thing I'd kind of like to draw out of that game is that Mavericks just, even as George says, like a 9-goal lead, you can't be losing that. But a team that knows when the chips are down and they might be a bit behind and are not bothered anymore about that position because they've come back and won it now quite a few times. That's so powerful mentally. And I imagine in that huddle just at the end, once the whistle blew, they just kind of got together and said, right, well, we've done this before, we'll just do it again. And they did, and they came out of extra time in a good way. They won by a few goals in the end. So I think Rhinos probably have been on the other side of that mentally as well, which probably was like quite crucial to how that game actually ended up unfolding. But yeah, what do you reckon, Paul?
Yeah, that you've literally stolen the point I was going to make. It was a bit like being in these games, whether it's a tight contest, whether it's the ability to come from a long way back or to hold off a team. We've spoken about teams who've been good at finding a way. We've spoken about Lightning, who seem to have kind of gone through the gears like gradually over the course of the season so far. But I think for Mavericks, I think it's probably a very good sign that while they continue to figure out what their best combinations are up against other combinations, I feel like to continue finding those ways, and it is highly stressful, you're right, George, because 2 extra time wins in 3 weeks is probably not something anyone's signing up for, like in a season, let alone over less than a month. So look, yeah, I think for Mavericks that's a real positive. For Rhinos, I think we kind of say the same thing every week, and I feel that's probably a big frustration for Lauren Palmer, because maybe they're not quite getting the message, or because they're not quite being able to sort of turn leads, keep leads, if you like, or kind of do enough to come back in a game. You know, we know the situation that sort of Rhinos are in with changes to the coaching staff early in the season, but they're a strong squad, and you know, I think it was week 3 when we spoke to Lauren, and she was like they're guilty of their own mistakes a bit too often, and it does feel like that's still the case for them. Like now, 10 weeks into the season, but yeah, for Mavericks, I kind of think if you're going to be in the shake-up and going to be intense games, to come out on the right side of them is probably not a bad habit to have fallen into.
No, definitely. I think they've proven that they are game winners, if that makes any sense. That, as you quite rightly said, when the chips down, they can come. But I also think that Mavericks have a very deep bench in regards to when you change a player, you're going to get something completely different from the person that you swap on, and also from what that then changes within the unit. A prime example of that is obviously if you take Emily Andrew out and you slide Emma Thacker back and have Kira in front, that's going to be a much more of a rotating circle. Of course, Emma Thacker can hold, but she is more of a mover. Whereas obviously you look at Andrew in there with Thacker, you've now got 2 really tall players. You've got 2 over 6-footers in there, and you've got a little bit more of a static holding game from Andrew and sort of that movement from Thacker, but also with the ability, if you've got a slightly shorter defence, to kind of play that ball high and above them. So they've got so much depth in there as a Maverick squad.
I think from a consistency point of view, let's touch on Forest versus Dragons, because that was a 77-53 wins. It means that Forest and Mavericks both go into that game now this weekend on the back of a win. There is very little between them in the table, 3 points, but Forest have got a better goal difference, which we obviously found out a few weeks ago is the first deciding factor when it comes to separating the teams in the table. That is no small feat, because obviously then if Forest win, they would kind of take 4th place this weekend. But before we do the preview stuff, I'm sure there's lots of time for that. What were your takeaways from Forest's win over Dragons, George?
The size of the scoreline for Forest versus Dragons obviously is something that you're going to want to look at. I also think that Dragons this season have been quite inconsistent. Obviously, they're at the bottom of the league and they've only won 1 game, as opposed to Forest, who in my opinion at the moment are having a really gradual sort of progression. I think they're playing really, really well, as opposed to Dragons' sort of inconsistency at times. I actually think that Alexandra Johnson has stepped up massively, obviously with the absence of Leah Middleton, which would have been not only gutting for them to lose her, but also in such a sort of horrific way. So I actually think that they home together really well after that. But Forest just brought it to them, just absolutely brought it to them, and they was insane. Obviously, Rolene striker,
Unbelievable.
I am a massive fan. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I'm a huge fan of her. I think she is having an outstanding season. Her shots, her 2-point shots, her 1-point shots, her holds, her rolls, I think she's just playing amazingly, and that's why she's sat at number 1. Do you know what I mean? She's putting up the most points in the Super League as a shooter. She's not necessarily the tallest shooter in the world, but the way she holds her space and moves her body is awesome. And then her shot, just, yeah. Big fan.
So I actually crunched some numbers on this because I called Raylene a couple of episodes ago Netball AI, and it's funny because I think Nia Jones turned to that precise description as well, and I just think it might be the best way to describe it. But the fact that Raylene currently sits on 110 super shots, she has, as an individual, scored more super shots than Leeds, Mavericks, and Panthers. She's 5 off Lightning and 6 off Pulse. And I couldn't work out Thunder because the website doesn't support that data. That's a whole other thing. But she has more than double Joyce Mavula, who's in 3rd place for individual super shots. It is absurd, next level. And it's got Forest into this position, it really has done. And George, you kind of alluded to it earlier, this league now being a bit of a shooter's playground. One thing actually off the back of this, I kind of wanted to bring up, and I'm really interested to see what you think, George, is with the super shot, when you're a goal attack, do you think as a goal attack, you can kind of hide behind the 2-point shot? You make up if you commit some errors, but then get some 2-point shots back. Do you think, because you're handling the ball more, right? And you're expected to play make more. Do you think it kind of I'm not sure where this thought is going, but I was just sort of thinking about it with we'll talk about this with some of the other games that happened, but when you've got goal attacks that maybe lose ball, but then come back and shoot 2-point shots, does that kind of cancel out?
I think it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? This is where I think that the super shot has completely changed the game. So you can throw away a couple of extra balls. Normally you'd get dragged. So I think you can probably make two. It depends what team you're in and what your coach is like, but you can probably make 2 or 3 mistakes in a row. And then you'll probably get dragged at least to sit down and say, look, this is what I need from you. This is what you maybe need to work on. Your defender's doing this. And they might put you back on. If the person you've been swapped with is doing an awesome job, they get to stay out there. Sports, it's what it is. But I do think that there is that ability now to kind of make a couple mistakes, but you know that you're not taking that player off if they're gonna bag you loads of 2-pointers. Having said that, I believe that if you have a really, 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 really strong goal attack, they will start to win you championships. And I think obviously we are talking about the Super League now. However, if you do look out overseas and you look at the Houseby, Grace and Ricky sort of partnership, you can see that is such a dominating partnership that as a duo, with Helen being so experienced and, on her game, and Grace and Ricky just having a massive SSN standout season, that the strength of both players will push you over the edge. Again, that sort of thing of the accuracy of shooters, like we know that Rolene's shooting the team in. You also look over sort of, I hope that I'm kind of blabbling a little bit.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense, George.
If you make mistakes as a goal attack and you got the 2-point, you're awesome, great, you've brought it back. However, if you didn't make the mistakes and you have the 2-point shot, that is the factor in winning you different games. So like, yes, Rolene is doing amazing and she is putting up so many super shots and she is such a dominant goal shooter. Imagine if they had sort of Rhea in there kind of being able to put them 2-point shots up as well. I know that Forest do tend to make that change in the last 5 minutes. I know that Freya Henshaw tends to swap on in that last 5 minutes. And I would kind of want to, I know she's young and, she's kind of getting that Super League experience, but I'd like to see her probably put a little bit more 2-point shots up and kind of just be like nailing them shots in, because obviously she's being brought on to shoot them. So that would, I think, push Forest that extra step right there. Because as we said, it is a shooter's game now. Like, defense are awesome. You got your Fumi Fidojis, you got your Razia Quashis that are going to turn you ball. But if your shooters aren't able to give you them shots, it becomes null and void.
That's why the volume piece, I think, was a really good point, Chloe, because we sit here and everybody makes such a song and dance about Fumi's incredible numbers, doubling her nearest competitor in the tables and in the stats lines. Rolling's doing the same, but at the other end of the court, right? So, like, I think it's well worth calling out, like, because we can all sit here and say, yeah, she's nailing it. And to a certain degree, shooters are expected to score their goals, but when you do it at the volume that Rolling's doing it at, I think that's incredible. The other thing I was going to note from the lineup is it looked to me like, well, not looked to me, Forest started Neve Cooper over Hannah Layton, and I think that was interesting. And you mentioned this, George, when it came to Mavericks being able to have a significant change, an alternative from the bench. I think I said earlier in the year, I think Neve, whether it's at centre or at wing defence, does give Forest that ability to maybe not play with the speed that Layton, Christian and Grierson can do, but actually just give them that bit more presence or a bit more physicality. And we know that is very much the way Dragons play. And I think that was pretty important, because I think they got a handle of the game fairly early on for that reason, and then we're able to just kind of pull away when you've got someone like Rowling.
Yeah, and I think Pekova was doing a really good job on Georgia Rowe, actually, like really good backing ups. But just to underline the point we're kind of making, which I think we're kind of all agreeing, that if Forest can get their goal attacks to start matching Rolene or get a bit closer to her, then they are going to be kind of up for that top 4 spot. That game against Mavericks, if they can do that to them, because in this game against Dragons, I'm pulling up obviously our good friend Jean Netty Stats, the queen.
She's amazing.
She's incredible. But Rolene shot 12 from 13 super shots, so she shot at volume 92% unreal. But then Freya Henshaw came in and shot 7 from 8. Rhea didn't shoot any super shots, but this time put up 10 from 12 in the single point, which I think she hasn't really been doing. So there is volume is starting, and I think Chelsea's figuring it out when to put Rhea on, when to put Freya on, and that I think is going to make them a bit more of an interesting prospect going into those last few games. But I mean, Rolene at 52 points in total, 83%. She was more accurate on the 2-point than on the 1-point. It's just like, what?
How would you fancy your chances in super shot range, George?
I guess if I go back to Super League, you'll see. I'm not gonna lie, I used to love a little bit of a fast five back in the day. So we'll see where we're going with it. I think the interesting fact of it is that we are sat here and we know that Rolene is getting all these shots and all this volume. So therefore, every Super League knows this. So not only is her shot insane, but her ability to become free is also insane. And that's also kudos to her mid-quarters, because you've got the girls feeding her and giving her that. They're giving her the ball. And that's why I come back to my point of the ultimate team sport is Forest are really finding their flow because their mid-quarters are feeding her so well. Brie Grayson's up there in the sort of top 5 for feeds in the league. So she's given her that access, and teams aren't shutting her down. The feeds are still going in, and she's able to be like, great, give me that ball and just kind of shooting the lights out. And it's great that Freya is coming in, and if she's, as you said in the game, 7 from 8, that's going to pour a little bit of pressure off of Rolene.
Mm. And I think that's what's interesting. Final point. George is nerding me out. When you see a team undo Forest, they undo the midcourt because and that's it. Like as we're saying, credit to Rolene because no one still has quite figured out how to defend her, but the job has to be done in the midcourt to stop that flow going in, which is kind of what Thunder had done to them the week before. But we did say, Paul, in the podcast in the preview that the super shot could basically decide this game. We thought about it. We're like, it could be close. They've both been playing very well, and then we just sort of went, but yeah, the super shot. And
then all of a sudden it went ping, Rolene. It's like, okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I suppose the big game of the weekend was first against second, and thanks to a strong finish from Pulse, it remains first against second. But that doesn't tell really half the story. Pulse 53, Lightning 58. Pulse coming from a long way back in the final quarter, and anyone who's seen the memes doing the rounds on socials will know that Vic Burgess was absolutely livid with that final quarter. But I don't think that should take away from what was a hugely impressive first 3 quarters from Lightning. If we compared them to very much where they were, and we can in this instance, Lightning against Pulse, when Pulse sort of went up to the David Wallace Arena and kind of made mincemeat of Lightning early doors and then just ran away with the game. It was kind of a similar story, but in a total opposite direction. And for me, it said 2 things, that Lightning, and we've just spoken about Rolene, and this is apt that we have George on today, but Sammy Wallace-Joseph is now really sort of owning that circle and allowing Lightning to sort of play their game around her. And in contrast, Pulse is still not quite finding their attacking flow after a really strong start through the first sort of maybe 5 or 6 rounds. Like the last few weeks, they just seem to be trying to find a way through some attacking stickiness, I think is the best way to describe it. George, I'll come to you first on Lightning and Sammy Wallace-Joseph, because that's 6 wins in a row now. They're absolutely flying.
No, definitely. I think that Ella Clark had a fantastic start of the season. I think she stepped up really nicely in that goal shooter position. But she offers a very different game to Sammy Wallace in regards to the moving and the way she holds and where she wants ball is very, very different. I do think that Lightning as a side are used to having a really tall, strong, dominant goal shooter that is just their holder and is at times, I would say, a get out of jail card. There's nothing wrong. We're going to throw it to you and hope for the best. And I think Sammy Wallace has done nothing but grow as she's come back. Obviously, she's spent 2 to 3 seasons trying to come back from a knee injury. And like personally for me, I am loving watching her get back on. Like that gives me the faith. But I think she's grown into it more and more and more. And she is just, her shots for a tall holding goal shooter, her shots from range are awesome. I actually think that the Berry Neal Sammy Wallace combination is growing really, really nicely as well. So yeah, I think the more they grow and the more obviously Sammy's now able to come into it, obviously having maybe limited minutes or kind of coming into it, still that return to play process with her knee. They're now finding her. They're obviously training with her week in, week out, game in, game out, and they're sort of getting their flow. And I think personally, I believe that the strongest teams are the teams that have a great back end, because you can have a great first half of the season, which Pulse have. And they're starting to get a little bit figured out now. It's coming to that back end of the season. There's lots of video. There's lots of smart coaches out there that are going to watch a team and be able to pull different players apart, or how to break down a unit to sort of suit them, turn ball, get ball, win ball, shoot ball. And I think at times that's what's happening to Pulse. I think everyone's now done their homework on sort of what they've been doing. They know that back end, Fumi's always going to turn the ball over. They're always going to bring it down. Alicia Scholes is always going to be speedy, and she's going to throw these long passes. They know that Liv's in there at tall goal shooter, but actually their goal attacks tend to float quite a bit outside that front zone, and they don't tend to punch and enter in, which I think is why the ball is getting turned over and that attacking unit's breaking down. Because defenders are able to kind of half sit on Liv and half fly out, and no one's really drawing off, and that's kind of where it's starting to shut down. And then Scholes gets a bit frustrated, and then she just throws the ball off court. And I think teams are starting to realise that. So I think whereas Loughborough have grown into the league, I think Pulse are now kind of getting into a sticky patch with it.
I mean, I couldn't put
That
it
is a
better.
perfect breakdown.
Yeah. Because I was just about to say, like, when
Right, that's the end of this podcast. Thanks very much. George has dropped the mic. Very well done.
No, but I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, the goal attack position for Pulse was a real problem. When I watched the game live, and then I went back and I went to, like, every time Pulse lost possession and why they lost possession, and the names Kelly and Briett just appeared again and again and again. And then every now and again there was a peppering of Scholes. I think Scholes was the pressure of Beth Cobden, arms over, just really kind of hassling. But a lot of it was really like errors from Briett and Kelly. And to be fair, Dan Bird, she rotated them. She tried, come off, come back on, come off, come back on. And, they came back at Lightning, but the problem is when you're chasing, you're chasing such a big deficit in a game where we said it was going to be about pride, and it really felt, the energy felt like that, certainly from through the screen, because I wasn't there. But I think the other thing was that Fumi did win ball off Sammy Wallace-Joseph. There is still scope, I think, there is still for the teams as Lightning build, and as we're saying, like, Wallace-Joseph is becoming a force. If the feed is not pinpoint, there is still areas, and I think Bella Bayliss had a bit of a game that she'll probably want to look back at as well, because she came on, and it was credit to Vic Burgess in a way to chuck her on into that sort of frame, like, right, experience this, you're young, you need to feel that out. But she was having a bit of a nightmare getting the ball in, and that was where I think, plus the box in the second quarter from Pulse and there on after was like really tough. Like, they were really desperately trying to win that ball back. So Pulse were, all the way to the end. And then there was that, I was just listening to Berry Neal actually on Off the Court, another great netball podcast, and she just sort of said how the feeling in the changing room afterwards was just annoyed anger, because that final quarter was such a disaster for Lightning, and it's something that actually they feel like they're not getting a grip on, is they're in their final quarters sort of seeing games out. So yeah, look, a really interesting one. Not the scoreline anybody saw coming, but good for the neutral if you're like watching, as George says, the super shot bringing the game back in. Really interesting though that with 3 minutes to go there was 6 in it, and you felt like Pulse would win. Like, I don't know if anybody else was feeling that, but it was so close. And then Lightning kind of just got into this possession game, and then obviously forgot the 5-point thing and all sorts.
There was about 8 minutes left when Nat and I were watching it, because we watched it on Sunday night when we came back. Hadn't had enough netball over the weekend. Decided to watch one more game. And then Kira came down the stairs, and Kira said, "Oh, they lost, didn't they?" I was like, "Oh, bloody hell!" Like, literally with like 6 minutes left to go, I was like, "This was bubbling up quite nicely." Thanks, Kira. Cheers. I do think that the dynamic in the last part of that, just to put a bow on this game, is interesting, because I think in a funny way it's one of those moments where Pulse might have kind of written off the 3 quarters and can take what they can take from the last quarter, but actually that last quarter where they let things slip, Lightning will be able to take away from it. And as we enter like the final 3 weeks of the season and get into sort of final series at the end of the year, I'd be fairly certain that these two, who've met each other loads over the last couple of seasons, are going to have another sort of epic showdown. And the fact that the two games have seesawed so much, I feel like I don't know what's going to happen when they next face each other. It's like, usually you look for clues, but I'm like, I'm not sure there were any clues in amongst all of this. One final game from the round then, before we get to have a chat with George in a little bit more detail, and that was Thunder beating Panthers in Liverpool. Still think it's quite funny that Manchester Thunder, who are so Manchester, were playing in Liverpool, but that is such a great arena. I heard lots of people talking about it on socials, and even kind of over in Sheffield, there were people who were kind of heading over there the next day. A job well done in the end from Thunder, but not the convincing win that we might have thought, George.
No, not the convincing win that we would have thought. I think, obviously, there's a couple of different reasons. You do have to look at Thunder and think they have been littered with some misfortune in regards to injury. Obviously, they had a pretty stacked team that they had signed, and obviously with the absence of Lois Pearson and Paige Reed, and then obviously huge congratulations to Laura Malcolm and Natalie Metcalf, but also, not having them in the sort of, they're in the mix, of course, but, maybe a little bit of their court presence. And I don't actually think that Thunder have really solidified their team. They're still kind of in this point of the season where their starting seven does change quite a bit, and that's not something we're seeing for any other team, and they're being forced to. You've got these young girls, amazing, get to come on the court, give it their everything, get some new sort of experience in there, but you've still got to understand that they are younger girls and they don't have that experience. So I think that may have played into it at times, and at parts sort of that I would see maybe decisions that maybe a little bit more experienced players wouldn't make, or choices that you would kind of take in that regards. But yeah, I think Thunder have probably struggled a little bit with the sort of calmness and kind of settling into the league. I just don't think they have their flow yet, and I think that Panthers are a sort of team that will just keep grinding you down and grinding you down and grinding you down. Tiggy Berger is having some, she's not necessarily a long range shooter, but that's why you've got Sinclair and you've got Creek coming on to do the long shots, and sort of Siggy there to post up and shoot high percentages from that 1 point range. I also think you've got Michelle McGee that will just grind and grind and grind and grind and grind and keep going. And that's something that's hard, obviously, when you're feeling under the pump and you've just got this player that will not leave you alone. So you've got her in the back, and then Jazz is obviously having a great season. So I wasn't actually necessarily super surprised at the score, because Panthers aren't a team to be written off. And I don't think the Thunder have 100% found their flow yet.
Yeah, because I think there was some news that Anya Williams was actually out for the game.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, as if Thunder haven't had enough attacking problems. They had to pick off Lily Jones from like the Team Bath Next Gen squad to kind of sit on the bench for them. Like option number what? Feels like option number 87 for Thunder so far this season.
How's Karen Gregg's heart doing, I wonder? Because honestly, that is, and I think we have to bear in mind what that does for El Murray as well, having to basically coach your young front end in front of you all the time, and what that does to your confidence, and what that does to the responsibility that's then on your shoulders as well. Like, I think that we maybe saw a bit of that in that game as well, like just struggling a little bit. Well, not struggling, but I think I imagine that's not an easy place to be at. But one thing that struck me in that game was we saw triple towers, which was Josie, Nicola Smith, Elliot McCormick coming in.
You've been desperate to see this, haven't you? You've been desperate to see this. You have, yeah.
Manifesting it, and then it comes out, and then there's just this moment where Elliot McCormick is like, statistically should not have been able to get that ball, but wins this really big ball. And it retrospectively, like when you're a journalist, you look back at that and you decide that's the winning moment because you know the feature. But it felt like a big game swing, because we were going goal for goal. It was really, really tight and nothing guaranteed. And I think also a big game for Gabby Sinclair, who Panthers really, really missed the week before, but 27 goals, 100%. Like, that's the kind of performance they've been wanting from her, and she came out and delivered that. And we were saying before we went live, Paul, like, that's when you have a goal attack that can play like that, volume like that, accuracy like that, and then you got somebody like Ziggy Berger that's like, under the post doing similar sorts of things in her role, like that's really the Panthers that everybody kind of hoped. So we saw a bit of it in that game, and it really did push Thunder to the wire. And I think that sort of slight defensive change at the end, if we're being honest, maybe is what swung it, or maybe I'm just looking at it with like rose-tinted lenses.
You're
But,
looking at it with someone who wants to get their clip art out but can't do it from your Greece hotel. Is that correct?
yeah, like I just think that dive for the ball that Elliot
Yeah.
did, like to get that turnover to sort of swing things back the way Thunder. But it was a big one. What do you make of it, Paul?
Yeah, look, I think the same. I think I said it felt like sort of Thunder just managed to get the job done, and I think that was the way, and I think they deserve immense credit for that. I asked Karen when I spoke to her after the Pulse game earlier this season if it was a case of just making sure they stayed in the hunt this year, and I think it's really important that we kind of make that point, because they've had to make kind of more changes than anybody else. Like I think we said last week, they'd only named an unchanged team twice, and then they made more changes at the weekend. So twice through 10 rounds of action is pretty brutal. Like when you consider that some of the teams are so consistent, and if they are making changes, it's tactically rather than because they have to. So yeah, I think Thunder again have done what they do best. I think it was good of them to get a rest into Emma Rayner as well, because obviously she'd kind of played centre the previous week with Amy Carter out injured. So just starting to get those options back, and then like having Emma Rayner have such a brilliant season, be able to come off the bench and kind of add a bit of quality when they needed it, and maybe a bit of calmness at different times. I think that was really important, and speaks to something we've said all year, that the strength of squad is really going to be important coming down the stretch. Just before we wrap up the weekend, it's worth pointing out that by the time this goes out, Panthers and Dragons will have played their rearranged game. That game's taking place on Wednesday evening. And I suppose technically, a win for Panthers there would only have them sort of 7 points behind Mavericks. So that's still in the hunt, right? They could make it interesting, but they would need a pretty phenomenal finish to the season. But worth pointing out.
So that's what I was actually just going to add in, is that Thunder just denied Panthers a bonus point.
That's where I was going.
It's like we know what we're talking about.
It's like we've been doing this for like 10 weeks of the season and we're flying. We didn't just make it up like a week before we decided to launch it. It's like we've been doing this for years.
But yes.
So look, that's the round in the books. As we always like to do, George, when we've got a guest on, we like to have a little bit of a chat, and we touched on a few things at the start, but kind of keen to just to get into you a little bit, and sort of, I suppose the first question, given what you've been through, is where do you find yourself at the moment? Like where do you see yourself in your netball career?
I'm probably at I'm probably gone through like the different stages, and they actually say when you hurt yourself, you go through like grief. I think I'm at the stage of like, I'm almost over it, and I'm at this point of like the biggest frustration I've actually felt the entire way through my rehab, in which I'm so close, but I'm so far, and I haven't quite found my flow just yet. So I'm kind of in that frustrated period of like, turns out I can play. It turns out I can do some netball, and I can still know how to catch and throw and shoot. So I'm in that frustrating phase there where I kind of just want more from myself and my body. So I'm kind of getting back onto the court. So super grateful for Mavericks and like the NXT Gen squads to have that platform to kind of come back in and sort of play netball again. Obviously doing super amounts of coaching, which I absolutely love, like not being able to play but being able to pass my knowledge onto the younger generation. And then I do get that same like satisfaction when they nail it that I would get off playing a good game myself. So that has been awesome, just like coaching and passing on my knowledge and trying different things with the girls, and sort of seeing girls, make it or like hit the trials or like win a game, like so coaching lots, doing lots of netball camps and summer camps and schoolwork with like out the box, and then like future wise I'm terrible because I always want more. And now I'm playing a little bit. I'm like, I want more for my body, and I want to play Super League, and I want this and I want that. So I guess I kind of want to get back to where I was. Is my biggest thing, and I'm super frustrated because I'm so close. The closest I've been, which almost feels further away.
No, it's funny. I'm sure you've done the same, Chloe, and you speak to athletes who have gone through a pretty serious and I kind of think in some ways traumatic injury, because it's taken such a lot out of you to kind of find yourself maybe at the point that at some points you maybe never thought you'd even get to, right? Like that's the feeling. So I suppose for netball fans, like the idea that you still want to play and still harbour those ambitions, like how close technically do you think you might be? Do you think it's just a case of taking it each day as it comes? Because I remember you saying to me previously, like it was such a nasty injury, you do have to sort of see how you feel.
Yeah, I've seen multiple surgeons, multiple specialists. I've stood in rooms and I've stumped people because they're like, I don't know why it's doing this, and none of us know why it's doing this, and there's no answers, and that's no one's fault, which is even harder to swallow sometimes when there's no one's fault and there's no answers. But I have to believe that everything happens for a reason. Had this not happened, would I have gone into coaching? Would I have found out that that's another passion of mine? Would I have started my own business? All these things, like I just don't know any of that really. But I guess it is a load intolerant knee to a certain extent. So we're just trying to put some load through it. And at times it's done amazing. Considering the start of the Next Gen season, we were still fiddling around with it. I managed to get, I think, 4 games in a row, and then I had to take a little break, and then I'm hoping to play the back end of the season. So yeah, I feel very close. I think I feel good. I feel old. Don't get me wrong. I feel really old, especially when there's kids on my team that are genuine kids and their parents have to drop them at training. Kind of, that makes you feel old, and then they take ball off you and you're like, great, that is humbling. But no, I definitely feel good. I feel good, and I just want to play, basically. Let me train.
It sounds like when you're talking about being old, it just means you sound like you have perspective. I don't know, like that's what I'm hearing when you're talking. It's like you're not old, like I'm older than you, but I feel like you
Listen,
have
I'll blow
a
you both
wisdom.
out of the water if it comes to old, so let's not go down that route.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that really struck a chord with me, probably because I got married last year, and when you talked about maybe not being able to walk down the aisle because your knee had blown up. I mean, you're in this great space now, and you're pushing yourself, but you must have been going through some really serious lows as well. Is there any sort of people around you that you kind of lent into? Like, how did you get through those particularly dark days that would have come with this injury?
It's interesting actually, because I would say that when I'm home and I'm having, like, because I had to have another surgery when I got back from New Zealand, you got your family around you, you've got your friends that you've had for years, and that just, I don't need to say anything, and them just know how I feel. But then obviously I've got my husband, and like he has been there through like every single step, every single little milestone and like downfall, and he has massively been like my hugest, biggest fan. Bless him. Well, the first day I played, like me and him were just so we were just, I mean, emotional, which is embarrassing, but we were just so nervous, and we were like, I was like, that I feel more nervous now than I did my wedding day, and he's like, oh my god, same. But I think kind of I remember sitting with the lights, and I was in New Zealand at probably my biggest lows, and I made like my friends for life out there, like literally like family. Like I remember when I told the Heffernan twins that I played, and they literally sent me a picture of them sat in the car crying because they were just so stoked for me. And when I left, I remember me and like Ranga had like a big hug, and it was weird. It felt like I was leaving like my second home, and I'd made all these friends, so I had loads of support from them. And my husband was awesome. He was like, didn't care if I didn't walk down the aisle. My dad and my brother were just going to carry me downstairs, and he was just going to be at the end, and he would have just carried me back the other way. And there was a lot of carrying emotionally and physically. We lived upstairs, so he had to carry me upstairs so many times. He made so many cups of tea. He wiped away many tears, but he's been my biggest fan. And at times I've been like, no, I'm going to quit. What's the point? What is the point? Like, I'm too old for this. I'm not going to make it. And he's like, shut up, come on. Like, and he'll let me cry and let me feel it out. And then he'll just come with like the most amazing, like, answer of why I should carry on. And then I always end up carrying on. So no, wouldn't been able to do it without him. So he's been my like biggest support. So a huge shout out to him.
That's amazing.
That's so nice.
It's so amazing to hear. But also like that you made such connections over there, not just the love of your life now, but obviously like friends. Like, you know, I think sometimes in sport we can forget the sacrifice that maybe people make to be so far away from home and to be a million miles away from the people who've kind of got you to the point in your life. But putting sort of the emotion of it aside, it felt like at the time it was a big career decision for you as well. And obviously the injury has been the injury, but you were really finding your feet over there as well. So it must have been like doubly difficult, because we obviously are getting to a point of the year where people are talking about where players might move and players might change. You obviously took a huge leap to go over there, and it has significantly changed your life. And I think that's like, it's so fascinating to get your sense of perspective, because despite saying you're old, you're not old. Like, let's just nip that in the bud. But to have that sense of perspective, as Chloe said, to go through what you went through out there. But how big, if we go all the way back, how big a decision was it to go out there in the first place?
It's interesting, actually. I think that I was at a point where I'd gone to Mavs, gone to Wasps, come back to Mavs while I was at university, and it was getting to a point where I was like, right, I'd finished my degree, we're in COVID, and I was like, I don't know, I'd had this big mentality shift. For the first time in my life, I think I really knew what it meant to be an athlete, and I was training every day, and I was in the best shape of my life, like by far. And I was like, right, what do I want? And like, I've always massively looked up to Joe Harton, and Jolene Henry and Robin Burton came over, and they all have this like Kiwi style, and they all talk about family and like how close it is. And I kind of like was with Step Out 7 at the time, who are my management, and Michelle and Helen, and I was like feeling the waters. I was like, what do you think? And they're like, we'll just put the feelers out, you know, like let people know you're kind of looking, seeing what you want, and then you just like create a reel. And I just basically wanted to see what options there were or what potentials there were. I didn't really address it at the time, how serious of a leap it would have been. But yeah, like basically still like that unfortunately for them, they just had 2 ACL goal shooters. So they were like, we're looking for a shooter. I was looking for a club. And then I ended up, it all feels quite informal, because when you have an agent, it goes through them. So you don't actually speak to the club yourself. And I just felt really weird about that, because I've always been like a face-to-face person. So at the time, it was Lana who was like the CEO, and Ranga who was the head coach, and they sat down and just had a phone call with me. And I was like, yeah, these are cool people. These are awesome. They're lovely. And felt right. I got the best feel for it. And then they were like, right, they give you a contract, and they're like, there's X amount of days on the table for you to sign it. So you read it, make sure you're happy with it. And I was like, great. I read it and I sent it back the same day, because I was like, that's what I want to do. And then it was hilarious, because like I looked out to the garden and my dad's shoulders were shaking where it was crying.
Wow.
But I just literally looked at it as this. I was like, no one thrives in comfort. I've always believed that. And I was comfortable at Mavericks, and I wanted a new challenge. And I was like, right, the very worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to go. I'm not going to take to court. I'm going to make no friends and not speak to anyone for 5 months. And I was like, and the best case situation is I have a great season. I make loads of friends and I love it. And luckily for me, it was like even better than the best case situation, because I met a husband. I ended up being there for like 8 months instead of 5. There was an England series out there that I got to play in afterwards, and like it was like probably the best England series I've ever had in my life. So yeah, I was like the best case situation.
Yeah.
It feels really cool to be able to speak to you about all of this, George, because it's been such a sort of a big story arc for you, and to have gone through all of that and to be on this side of it. And I think Paul and I are really looking at each other like, oh, I think we've got to have George on again already, because you've got a tactical brain that we quite like already.
Yes.
With coaching, what's the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge for coaching, I think initially, this is probably going to sound really silly, because initially I didn't have, so I've got my level 2 now, which is awesome. But at the time when you're coaching, I'm trying to give like my knowledge. So my knowledge and my experience of how I've been coached and what I do to children. And I think at first, turns out I play really weirdly and my angles are completely wrong, because that's not what I want from anyone else but myself. But I think just kind of changing up, working out how players play and how I can help enhance their game. So how every single shooter So because I'm a shooter, that's how I sort of started. I did like master classes and stuff. Every single shooter will have a slightly different technique, and every single shooter will hold slightly differently. And it's about working with a player and working out how they're going to hold or how they're going to move for them, and picking your brains around it and being like, right, against this sort of defender, we're going to do this. And I think that's kind of been my biggest challenge, is like picking players and then working out their styles and then how we can implement it. So I think that was my biggest thing, and sort of going into working with clubs and athletes that are kind of, working towards trials or potentially different Super League entry levels, and then going into schools where you're teaching kids how to catch and throw, and they're in year 4 or they're in year 5. I think sort of changing up my levels of being like, right, now I'm picking my brains on these real specific things for certain players, and then you go into a team environment like, this is how you catch a netball, this is how you do a shoulder pass. So that was definitely a challenge. And also, I actually never, when I was playing myself, I wasn't really into watching video or like cared about any of the other defenders or what I was doing. Whereas like being injured, I sat and I watched so much netball that I became smarter. And actually, when I was in my second year of injury, Grace and Armina and I had loads of conversations about, she's like, what do you think? Can you watch this bit of video? Can you watch this of me? Can you watch? And it was like quite a nice kind of conversation of like what I thought. And the girls were really inclusive of that. And I sat on the bench for like all the still home games and started to see things and hear what like Joe Morrison and like Rianga was saying. And I think it all slowly made me smarter. So I think then when going into it myself, working from that level kind of then filtered down. But I'm loving it, like genuinely loving it so much. Didn't think I would, but I do.
See yourself being a Super League coach?
Honestly, I would love it. I would love it. I would love it so much. I was like, I've always loved that Tamsin was a player coach, and I'm like, one day she could get her knee right. I'm going to be old, and I hopefully will be a player coach.
You keep saying old. I think we're going to have to call the podcast. You have to give the podcast the title, I'm old.
Old fish, new Inga.
Might be good. You might have done it for us. You might be the first guest to actually give us our podcast episode title. We'll take that.
Oh, hopefully I'll have a new surname and then like new lease of life.
One question on moving to Australia, and I suppose it pertains to like the professional era that we're kind of going on here. What are your hopes for the Super League in this country, George? Because we look down in Australia and to a degree as well New Zealand, and given what you've just spoken about, and I think given the standard we've seen out there, it's right to sort of say that about the ANZ as well. Where do you kind of see England and the UK in relative terms to that? And we all kind of know that there's a bit of a way to go, but it feels to me that there's a real desire for this sport to take over from those leagues down there. And you've been down there and sampled them, and they obviously will have no intention of playing second fiddle to us. But you know what I mean? You have to have ambition. You have to have targets.
No, definitely. I think one of the main things is that in Australia, netball is played like as soon as you can catch and throw, and it is just a massive sport out there. So like football over here is so dominating. So football in the UK is massively dominating. And then I would say after your football, you would have your rugby, and that is men's and then women's, and then you've kind of got netball coming into that. But whereas you look at Australia and New Zealand, so that New Zealand rugby dominates for the men and netball dominates for the women. Australia, Aussie rules dominates and league dominate, and rugby league dominates for the men, netball for the women, and they are just sort of head-to-head dominant sports, and you get that buy-in and you get that consumers. And when you're little over there, you want to be a netball player. When you're little over here, you want to be a football player. And I think that's the biggest thing, and kind of I guess you need that buy-in from the public and also guys as well. Like over there, like men still play and boys play throughout the school. Like when I was in New Zealand, I coached a men's team and they took it really seriously, and they wanted extra sessions, they wanted this and that, and it was like awesome. I know men do play here, but I think that's just something that they need to push more. So I think from that side of things, you've obviously got that. And then I think from actually sort of like the league differences, you've got like Australia, who've got these big stadiums and they have the creme de la creme and recovery and nutrition. You go and you see their different facilities and they are incredible. And I guess at times we're still sort of training in just like your normal leisure centres and stuff like that, and understand, because obviously space and things like that. But over there, like even in Invercargill, which is like teeny tiny, you are like, there's like I think 12 netball courts, one that's just the netball court, and then the stands are there, and you like have your own little compartment. You fly to all your games. You know, you've got more. There's more funding there as well, and I think that there's a higher expectation on athletes, as in like we would be training 6 out of the 7 days a week in some format. You go out into the community way more, and you do loads of different things. I remember when I was out there, I was helping the police fit car seats for kids, because why not? Do you know what I mean? Why not? So I think there's obviously that whole side of it, but then also the amount that you train, the expectation you have on each other is completely different. You don't have to have another job to support yourself. No one does. So when you're playing, you are just playing, and that's it. And your whole focus is there, and you're having coffees with the team. You're all living together. You're in this little like unbreakable bubble, and that's just not the case here. Like if you play Super League, you have to have a job. There's no way you could just float on it. So I think until you can get to a point where you've taken girls and you've put them in a bubble and they're training, you know, a 2-hour session in the morning, then a gym, and then they get to go and chill and have a recovery session, and the next day you're in for video, and then you've got to swim, and then the next day, like, it's completely laid out. Until that can happen, people don't have to go to work. There's going to be a big difference, I guess, in ability and sort of professionalism in that regards.
I mean, it does feel like we've got such a long way to go. Go on, Chloe, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, what George is saying about, it's what players that I speak to, it's what they say. It's like, in a way, with this kind of interim period of sort of nearly professional, you're kind of being paid less to do more, because you can't do your full-time, well, a lot of them can't do the full-time job they could do. They're playing more netball, but they are therefore earning less money. So it's like that. It does still feel, I think, you know, Jenny Sinclair said to us, it's about 10 years behind. And it does, when you hear that from George. And the other thing that struck me about fitting car seats for children with the police, other than being quite random, but that's quite deliberate, like, here's a role model for you in your community, and it's a woman playing netball. And like, we don't have that imagination in this country, like, I think, or at least in the UK, like, we don't see netballers up there. Or, you know, we did maybe for a year in 2018, but we haven't really had that sustained kind of placing. And there's a lot of work to be done there. And it's about raising profiles. It's about players wanting to raise their profiles. It's about players having the time to raise their own profiles as well. Like, social media is there, but can you do that on top of your job and your training and all the other things you're expected to do? So I think it's time and it's money. And those are all the things that Claire Nelson will be hopefully looking at and thinking about.
I do think it's important though. Like I have a young daughter, and I think for them to have role models come to their schools, to their clubs, to make superstars out of netball players. I said it, Chloe, you said it for me in some ways. Like when I first started covering the sport at Sky, I was like, these people are amazing. Why are these not superstars? Why are we not seeing them? They've got brilliant stories to tell. They're amazing at what they do. I kind of feel like I keep coming to different conclusions, but today's conclusion is like we need to make our players superstars more. And to hear what kind of steal we're doing with getting them out into the community, it starts there, right? Like where I live is sort of 25 minutes on a train away from the Copper Box, and Fat Face are London Pulse's sponsors, but there's a Fat Face in the town centre that doesn't have Pulse in it. And you're thinking like, well, the train station is literally at the other end of the town here. Why could we not see the Pulse players in the window? And that's not Pulse. That could go for like Forest have got Next on their kit and Thunder have got Aon. Why aren't we using the girls a little bit more? And if sponsors are, then I apologise for that. But I feel like that's maybe where we should see this a little bit more. But anyway, we get way too deep in the weeds and we've kept everybody, considering Chloe's on holiday as well, sorry, for far too long. We've got a final round to rattle through so you can get the Usos in, Chloe, right?
It is midnight here, I will tell you.
You are closing in on 24 hours then, are you?
Yeah.
Not? Okay, let's rattle through the preview then. We don't need to hang around any longer on that front. Very, very quickly, round 11, there's one huge game here, right? It's Mavericks versus Forest. It's massive. Is it too obvious to say it comes down to maybe how a banging form Raz can stop a banging form Rolene? Is that too simple, or is that where we're looking at things? George, you first.
I have to say, I am a wee bit biased when it comes to Razia Quashi because I think she is such an unsung hero in regards to, at times you're looking for players to turn ball, turn ball, turn ball. It's what she does to players to stop them getting the ball. So I think, yes, she gets intercepts and rebounds, but she actually puts a lot of doubt in feeders and she actually stresses out a lot of goal shooters. So I think that is a massive, massive key matchup for them. I do think last time when these two teams met, I think that the Mavericks attacking players, be in sort of Emily Andrew, Emma Thacker, Kira Rothwell. No, Kira wasn't playing the last one. Sorry, Amelia Hall, Susie Liverseed. I think they had the upper hand, and I actually think they ran the show. I think they did a very, very good job against a Forest defence, which teams have been really struggling against. So I actually think if Forest want to compete, they need to really tighten up in their defensive end because that is where Mavericks beat them last time. Try not to be biased. That's where Mavericks beat them last time. And I do think that if a goalkeeper is going to stop Rolene, it's going to be Razia. So I'm actually really interested to see that matchup. I believe that if you want to stop Forest, you stop the feed. So you're going to have to shut down that midcourt really, really, really hard before it gets into her hands because when it's in her hands, she's a game winner. She stood in the 2-point zone, getting, 12 out of 13 shots in. So you've got to stop it getting there before it even gets to that point. And then for Mavericks, I think they did play well against Rhinos. Do they want more? Definitely want more. So I think that they just need to be calm and solidify. I think at times they make unenforced errors, which is something that they're going to want to iron out for this game. So if they can kind of rewatch the previous game and stick to task and what they did really, really well against Forest last time, I think they could do well.
Yeah, for me, because I was at that game in the most point, right, and it was an interesting one because I think one of the things that Mavericks did really well was that they punished Forest really well. Like they took a lot of the turnover ball to goal. My thing and one of the things actually at the time that Mavericks it was one of the first games I felt that we started seeing proper super shot defense. But I just think this time Forest is a different proposition on the super shot because Chelsea has been blooding in Freya at this super shot period, and it's not as simple as like 2 on, like, because one of the things in SSN that I always find really funny is when Dan Ryan says to his defenders, like, this person's a threat, 2 people on, force them for the ones, and they literally sandwich. But I just and I think you would have done that to Forest before, but you can't quite do it now. I don't think you could take the risk, or I don't know how that will be played. I think how Mavericks use their bench, which George alluded to, is it does offer you lots of different things. It's the confidence in the bench and the decisions to sub at the right time, because I think Mavericks haven't always been on point with that. For Forest, they look stronger defensively than they have done, but I think George is right. It's the feed, it's breaking up the connection, stopping that ball speed early. So the centre pass defence for Mavericks is just going to have to be really, really serious. So I think it's just going to be a great, great game. I really do. Rhea Dixon will need to put up some shots as well. She didn't do so many last time, so.
I think that's been the point that you and I have alluded to it a couple of times, and to hear George talk about it, to have that volume, not necessarily volume, but at least a split come from your goal attack is, I think, going to be pretty pivotal come sort of the back end of the season. Massive game Saturday, 4:00, Hertfordshire Sports Village, and I think if you look at who the 2 teams have got after that, I think that makes it even more interesting. Mavericks finish up with Panthers, then Lightning and Thunder, which is a tough end to the season. Forest have Lightning next week, who obviously they've already beaten, and they'll be playing them again in the Motorpoint Arena, which feels like it's going to be a Forest home game again, even though it's Lightning's home game. And then it's Panthers and Rhinos to finish off. So it does feel like this is massive, because whoever wins this is going to depend on which way it twists down the stretch. But this is the jeopardy we wanted from the league, right? George, you've been around it a long time. we want these kind of big games and big moments to sort of define what's going on in the season.
No, definitely. That's why they shrunk the league to have a richer sort of talent pool to pick from to make it tougher. No one wants to watch a game where a team's blowing someone out 20 points. You want a team where your heart's in your throat and you're getting more for your money in extra time. So I think that's exactly where you want it. I love going into games and you don't know who's going to win. And I love that. Like, that's why everyone's so excited about Forest, because no one really knows which way this is going to go.
Yeah.
That's why it's so exciting.
Who are you picking?
You've got to pick
You
Mavericks.
can't ask George that.
Got to pick Mavericks, even though Roline probably is my player of the season. So, like, it's a tricky one.
Who are you picking, Chloe? Let's throw it back at you.
Forest.
Forest. Oh, you can't. Now I've got to have the deciding vote. I feel like I've nailed my colours to the Forest mast fairly early on this season. So I feel like it would be bad for me to shy away from it. But I just think the Mavericks have found the way in games. And I think on the couple of occasions where I thought Forest would put their foot down, a couple of weeks ago as well, that they kind of didn't get over the line. So maybe how they deal with the pressure this time out, because I think if they'd have won that game, they would have gone level with Mavericks, whatever. I can't remember off the top of my head. So I think dealing with the pressure might be Forest. I'm sitting on the fence. I'm not.
It's a long way around not saying anything.
Yeah, I haven't said anything there really. I did like Mavericks. Now I like Forest, but I don't like anyone now. That's what I've said, basically.
Fair.
Sticking with it on Saturday, 7:00 at the Utility Arena. It's Dragons in 8 against Lightning in 2nd. Obviously, Lightning, they feel like a buzzsaw at the moment. It feels like it's a really tough one for Dragons to kind of have to come through. They'll obviously have kind of pretty strong home support, but George, it feels difficult to see anything other than yet another sort of Lightning win as they kind of motor to win number 7.
No, definitely. I think Loughborough will definitely take this one. I think they're doing nothing but grow into the season and into the league. However, Rhinos are a first half team. They tend to stick with teams for the first half and then they just fade away. So I would like to see Dragons. I would like to see Dragons kind of do well in the first half and keep pushing teams, even if they're not taking the win, they need to keep pushing. I'd like to see them put up a couple more 2-point shots, because I think that's the way that you're going to win this. I don't think that the 1-point game is going to take you over the line anymore.
I think that's fair. And they seem to have got away from that. Maybe it's, working out, teams have worked out how to play them, because it felt to me like Philippa Yarrington was scoring quite a few at the start of the year, and that I haven't done my research because I was busy at the weekend. That Philippa Yarrington is not kind of putting up as many, and it may be a tactical thing from the opposition taking on Dragons. Chloe, can you make a case for Dragons here?
I think to kind of, I don't know if I can make a case for Dragons. I think you're asking for kind of the impossible.
Right. You can make another case for something else if you want.
No. What I wanted to say was that Dragons, when they are put in the position of chasing with the 2-point shot, it's like they choke. When they're dominating the 1 point and they've built a buffer, then they're more confident on the 2-point shot. I just don't think they have the mindset to chase the twos, which is like, whereas you look at Mavericks and they're like, go on then.
Yeah.
So I think that's, if Dragons are going to make a dent or do something, they're going to have to find way to win ball and to try and start, the 5 minutes ahead, which I just think is going to be hard, because Loughborough's structures are just so painful. And I think Dragons have great ball speed through the midcourt. Like, it's rapid, it really fires. But Lightning are they're like the antithesis of that. They love unpicking that, so they just don't even match up very well for me. Like, it just, yeah,
big win coming, I think. On to Sunday, first direct at Leeds, Rhinos against Thunder. I think Yorkshire against Lancashire is always great fun. Leeds against Manchester. Two teams have done a really good job of hyping the game up. Thunder, I think, will want a big win, just because I think they maybe found the Panthers game a little bit closer than they would have liked. Chloe, I'll come to you first. Where do you see this one?
Yeah, this one was actually tough for Thunder last time. And do you remember there was the streaming controversy as well,
Yes,
which made it
that's
hard to dissect this one as we would have liked.
It
But
looked like Augusta because I was covering the golf at the same time, and they actually looked the same. I sent you a screenshot, didn't I? Looked like Augusta, green and yellow.
I'd love to do a little PowerPoint presentation of like moments that made 2025 NSL. That will be one of them. For sure. That was class. Yes, but I think one of the things that we talked about in that game was El Murray like super shot takeover in the final quarter, where she just was like enough and like just started hammering in twos. It's a grindy, tough game. Thunder have just had one. I don't know if they'll look. I don't know if I agree with you if they'll look for a big win, because I just don't think Karen Gregg still is in the business of big wins. She's just in the business of winning. So, she'll want performance, like, don't get me wrong, but like I think she'll take what she can as long as it keeps her in the game. We don't know the positions yet in terms of it. Anya Williams is back. Like we always say this, like we're not sure where players are and injury and whatnot. But yeah, like I think you favour Thunder, wouldn't you? You always would, but like Leeds are not going to go into this after coming out the back end of an extra time loss, like thinking that they can't do it. So yeah, it'll be gritty, it'll be tough.
Any matchups stand out for you in this one, George?
No, I actually think it'll be a really interesting game, to be fair. And Rhinos to me are a team that I would never write off. So I'm definitely excited for it. I'm actually up watching the game, so I'm very excited. I would like for it not to go into extra time, but be a close one. I would like to see the pressure be taken off Elmarie Vanderberg a little bit. I think she's been such a saving grace for them. So and like kudos to her. I don't think she's had the opportunity to shine because she's goal attack, goal shooter, and she's not really had a chance to settle herself. But she's held that group together like glue. So I'd like to see a good game for her because she's working so hard and she deserves it. But then also you have Juva Mentor on the back. Like, is she going to pull out a cracking game? You've got Joyce and Vula at the front, who we love to watch because she's so flary. So you've got your two bookends. It's what Rhinos do in the midcourt and whether, Rhinos are going to be able to shoot against that really big defence. I think Joyce and Vula will be fine, but Jones and Egg Baron, it's going to be a tough game for them.
With Nick Smith back in the mix, she is a monster.
Yeah.
Range that she
Chloe and her two defenders. I think we know when you come back from holiday what you're going to be doing with the Microsoft clip art or whatever it is you're working out of.
I do like Thunder is quite an easy one to sort of unpick as well. It
I might set you a challenge then to unpick something else. That might be the way.
Go for it.
Oh, challenge accepted. I like it. Last game of the round then, 6:00 on Sunday. If we think Mavericks Forest is a big one, I think this is sneaky big as well. We've spoken about sort of Pulse struggling a little bit in their attacking structures. Panthers are a sort of dogged, determined defensive team who will make it tough. Maybe a deciding factor here might be the fact that Panthers play on Wednesday. That's 3 games in a week, as opposed to Pulse playing, sort of having a full week off between the 2 games. George, come to you first. What do you think?
See if people noticed I've just been changing location. No, so I think the Pulse will probably want a good win under their belt, or just something a little bit calmer, a little bit more of a settler. As you said quite rightly, 3 games in a week is a tough one, but sometimes teams play better like that. They're not going to probably train this week. They're going to do video and they're just going to go back to back game. That's the best way to learn. That's the best way to progress, is just through playing. So I actually think it could be a bit of a risky game there. Like, you've got a team that are going to be just playing netball and a team that are growing, as opposed to a team that's having a little bit of a sticky patch. So it should be interesting, but I do think that it will fall Pulse's side. Yes, they're having a sticky patch. Yes, they're not playing as smoothly as they can, and they lost to Lightning. Lightning are number 2 in the league. They're last year's Super League winners. They know how to win. So I think that actually Pulse will take the win. However, I don't know how clean of a game it's going to be.
Chloe, two defeats in their last 3 for Pulse. Yeah, admittedly one of those is Lightning, but Forest was the other one. Like, if it becomes 3 defeats in 4, then Pulse are facing a bit of an issue, aren't they? I think.
Maybe a bit of an existential crisis, if I'm going to be dramatic. But I actually think Panthers really match up quite well.
They do. They do. Yeah.
The penalty count might be off the charts in both ends. And it's going to be really, really like physical, I reckon, this one. But look, I think was that goal attack issue for Pulse is exactly what Panthers will love, like will relish, knowing that there's a bit of an identity crisis going on there. So I think that looks good for them. I think containing less goals is another thing you got to do when you. That's like the first play against Pulse. So Panthers will know that. It depends on what form Gabby Sinclair is in and how many minutes. She played a big part of that comeback against Thunder. I think she'll be feeling herself a bit now. And like as George says, the back to back to back, she has been struggling with a bit with injury, but if she can sort of stay fit throughout that could definitely ask some more questions of Pulse. And I think it might be a bit of a barrage, but what better way to prepare for top four if not this? So yeah, what do you reckon? Any matchups you're keen on?
No, I was just looking back actually at the fixture earlier this season, because it was, you're right, it's probably where Pulse's kind of not, I don't want to say wobble began, because they were pretty comfortable winners in that game, and sort of they beat Thunder pretty well and they beat Dragons pretty well after that. But all three of those teams sort of managed to find a way against them and pick a few holes in them. So yeah, like I think from a matchups point of view, there's a lot of similarities in this Panthers team to that Seven Stars team, understandably from last year. And that Seven Stars team, if I remember correctly, picked up a win against Pulse last year.
In the copper box,
so,
yeah.
I
was there.
I always remember Tamsin telling me fairly early on when I started covering this sport that there are some teams, it doesn't matter where they are in the league, their matchups just kind of don't sit right against you, and for whatever reason you can't quite find a way. So yeah, maybe this is one that the Pulse don't need, but we'll review it at the weekend. I'm going to try and get there for the second half. I'm at Tottenham before that, so it'll be a
few beers,
right. Huh?
A few beers.
I it's always you doing stuff, drinking, Chloe.
I'm always smashed. Yeah.
No,
But George, actually,
I'll tell you exactly what might happen. Beers will depend on what happens tomorrow night when Tottenham are playing in the Europa League final. That might depend whether beers are consumed or not.
Gosh, pull on a bender at the copper box.
Come on, this 40-something-year-old doesn't go on a bender at the copper box.
George, actually, on this, do you think culture comes into question now for Pulse off the back of the last kind of 3 games? Or is that too deep? Is it too deep?
No, I don't think it's deep at all. I think that culture always plays a part, but I don't always think it's a deciding factor. I've gone through seasons where we've lost every single game and we are still the best of friends and we get on really, really well and the culture's great. It's just we're not winning for different reasons. I've been in teams where we're a top 4 team and there's little bickers and little kind of things going on in the team and things behind the scenes and little bits and bobs like that, and you just wouldn't know. So I do think that it does play a factor. Does it play the biggest factor in winning and losing? No, not always. Obviously, we're professional athletes or semi-professional athletes. You're not going to stand and have an argument with someone on court. Do you know what I mean? But I think that Pulse are going to really need to home together. I know there's some really, really strong relationships and friendships within that team, and that will help them with this. But I do think that although it will play a part, I don't think it'll be the deciding part. And I think that Pulse aren't losing their games because their culture's not there. I think they're losing games or struggling with games because I think teams have done their homework and they figured them out and they kind of need to give something a little bit different. That's where I'd probably go with it.
I think that's really fair. And I think we have to I think you said this fairly early on, Chloe, as well. I think you said it will be interesting to see how the sort of second half of the season plays out when teams have had a chance to look. And this wasn't specific to Pulse. This was kind of on everyone, when teams have had a chance to sort of work out what teams do. And as much as sort of for the first part of the season, Pulse's consistency of selection maybe did them a huge favour in getting into a rhythm, it maybe also allowed people to sort of see what they do well. So maybe, and whilst we've sort of said Mavericks are trying to put together the right 7, maybe for Pulse it's actually seeing how they can use their change up that little bit more effectively. I think that might be what I would say.
Yeah, and actually, like that's why I'm excited about the triple towers, because it's like Karen Gregor's deploying that because she can, but when she needs to, and she's been holding it and working on it and then enacting it when it's been required, rather than just being like, let me just give my players some minutes to run around. Like there's purpose in it. And the other thing that I think I may have said, and if I haven't said, I've been thinking it, is that kind of perversely, if Thunder end up having Paige Reed back and maybe even Lois Pearson back, kind of maybe does them a great favor, because they have this sudden
No
like
one's seen
two
them as well.
jokers in the deck that just
Yeah.
come out. Yeah, I mean that takes a lot of rehab and time and rebuilding relationships. So maybe it doesn't work out that way, and it's a bit of a fantasy. But that's the other thing that the second half is the real tell, isn't it? I think.
See, that puts a bow on it. Then. That puts a bow on round 11 and George's debut. Look, it's been incredible to have you. We could have spoken about lots of different things, lots of different ways, but I think you've given us a little bit of everything. And I think they always say leave them wanting more. And I think we definitely want a little bit more George a little bit later on in the season.
No, thank you very much for having me. I've had a good time just talking to netball and just picking each other's brains a wee bit. So it's been really nice. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you did say at the start you've become a real netball nerd, and I can confirm you're about as netball nerdy as we've had on the pod. So you can take a lot of pride in that.
Hurrah!
It's been a real privilege, George. Really appreciated it, and your time and your various locations around your house that we got to see.
It's a small house. Yeah, it's a small house with snoring dogs, wandering parents, snooping husbands, and bad Wi-Fi.
Well, thank them on our behalf as well for letting
absolutely.
us borrow
well, she's just snoring away there. Look.
Oh, look at her, fast asleep.
That'll be me in about 5 minutes.
Thank you to George. Thank you to Chloe as well for chipping in from holiday, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.